Hi everyone, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video. This one is going to be a continuation of the Rise and Fall series, and I'm going to be looking at the Derrick Rose era of the Chicago Bulls, which lasted from 2008 to 2016, so over the course of 8 seasons. I'll be going through how they rose to be at a very successful level, how they plateaued, and then how ultimately they really started to fall apart. If you enjoy the series, check out the others on the playlist, and let's get into it. So a few things to go over first as far as the setup of the page. On the bottom left, I have regular season player stats. Bottom right are playoff individual statistics, and then the top left are like regular season numbers like record, seed, playoff result, offense and defensive rating. So as you can see, 2008 to 2009, this was Derrick Rose's rookie year. Um, as far as players on the team who were major scorers, you had the Bulls trading Drew Gooden and I believe Brad Miller mid-year, um, and Larry Hughes as well, I believe, to be getting in return John Salmons. I know for sure Brad Miller was traded for John Salmons, but um, or actually maybe he came over with John. I don't remember, but either way, the main scorers on this team down the stretch of the season were John Salmons, Derrick Rose, Ben Gordon, and Luol Deng. That was really their foursome leading the team offensively. Um, and in the playoffs, they actually didn't have Luol Deng though, because as you'll see, he missed a lot of time down the stretch of the regular season and only playing 49 games, and he actually didn't make the playoffs either. And so in the playoffs, you had this Bulls team actually overachieve quite a bit. They pushed the second seeded Celtics. Although without Garnett, they still pushed him to 7 games. And Derrick Rose, won Rookie of the Year this year, played really well in the playoffs too. Um, and he and John Salmons and Ben Gordon were a really solid trio as far as scoring went. And then you had like good role players like Tyrese Thomas and Heinrich and Joakim Noah also contributing mightily as well. So kind of a building block season. Going into 2009 and 2010, the biggest change on this team was that Ben Gordon left in free agency. His rookie deal was up, and I believe he had signed a qualifying offer, so then he could walk as a unrestricted free agent. So he left for a big payday in Detroit, and Chicago was left with still a core of, really Derrick Rose, Luol Deng, Kirk Heinrich, Joakim Noah, John Salmons as the core of the team. Um, this year, pretty similar to the last, you had your leading scoring trio of Rose, Dang, and Salmons, and then supporting players like Noah and Kirk Heinrich contributing as well. Still had Brad Miller, Tyrese Thomas, and then probably the biggest addition was Taj Gibson via the draft. They were the 7th seed again, and met up with I actually they were the 8th seed this year, so I have that wrong. But they met up with Cleveland in the first round, and really just the core of Derrick Rose and Luol Deng wasn't enough for LeBron in his prime. Um, Also, I believe by this point John Salmons had been traded to Milwaukee. By the deadline, they had traded him, so they didn't have him to help them out either, because I believe his contract was going to be up soon, and they wanted to get something for him before he just left in free agency. But really, after that trade, their offense really struggled, and also without Ben Gordon, their offense struggled because the only guys who could create their own shot were Dang and Rose. Going into the next year, things changed a lot. As you can see, their wins jumped up by 21, up to 62 wins. They were actually the 1 seed, and they reached the Eastern Conference Finals. And the big difference on this team was that their defense hiked up to number 1. Derrick Rose took a tremendous step forward, going up to averaging 25 points per game and 8 assists. He, I believe, became the youngest MVP ever. I think he was 22 at the time. Um, Along with that, you had Luol Deng still putting up solid numbers. Same with Joakim Noah. Um, they who were both very good defenders as well. They also brought in a few key free agents namely Carlos Boozer, who is a really big improvement on offense at power forward for them, putting up averages of basically 18 and 10. They also brought in veterans to help defensively, like Kurt Thomas, Ronnie Brewer, and Keith Bogans, and they also brought in Kyle Korver, who's a really good shooter off the bench. In the playoffs, the reason they struggled was basically, to me, it comes down to um, Derrick Rose ended up having to take on a lot of the burden offensively. And in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Heat put LeBron on him, and this is when like LeBron was at the height of his athleticism and was really able to lock up Rose pretty well. You can see during the course of the playoffs, Rose shot under 40% from the field. A lot of that came from that Eastern Conference Finals where LeBron really inhibited his efficiency, down from 45% during the regular season. So going into the next year, they repeated quite a bit of their regular season success. It was a lockout shortened year, but you'll look and see at their record at the top. If you adjust it to a full 82 game season, they went again 62 and 20. They are again the one seed. The real difference for this team was that their offense was really good this year as well, getting the fifth ranked offense in the league. I contribute that really to the addition of Rip Hamilton, who started for them as shooting guard. He was a really solid addition and kind of rounded out that starting lineup offensively. They still had a lot of their good bench pieces like Korver, Ronnie Brewer, Taj Gibson, and Omer Ashik, and a rookie Jimmy Butler. But bringing in Richard Hamilton to be another guy on offense helped them out quite a bit. Derrick Rose still put up really good numbers, not quite his MVP numbers, but still 22 and 8 is really good. Same with Luol Deng and Boozer, still put up pretty solid numbers. And in the playoffs, the real difference of why they didn't win was that Rose went out after game one, so Philly was able to beat them down during the rest of the series. So yeah, this season was ultimately cut short because of a Derrick Rose injury. Going into the next year, if you're unfamiliar, Derrick Rose was out the entire season this year, so they were really led by what remained of this team, which was Boozer, Joakim Noah, and Dang, and then they relied on a lot of the role players to step up and play bigger roles, like Kirk Heinrich, Jimmy Butler, Taj Gibson, Rip Hamilton, and then they also signed Nate Robinson to fill in at point guard for Derrick Rose being out, who actually played really well, was the third leading scorer on the team, scoring 13 points a game for them. Joakim Noah, I believe, was an All-Star this year, and Luol Deng was an All-Star this year. They still got to the second round, and they still, they lost to Miami pretty easily because they just didn't have that guy that they could go to down the stretch, like their number one option. Um, Nate Robinson was, in fact, the leading scorer on this team in the playoffs, so which is pretty cool. Luol Deng shot pretty bad in the playoffs. You can see he shot 6% from three, and he shot 38% from the field, which were really bad splits, but really balanced scoring. But that really was just a result of them not having a go-to option. Next year, basically the same thing. You had Derrick Rose miss this entire season, I think, except for 5 games. So basically the same exact season as the year before, except Rip Hamilton was gone and they brought in Mike Dunleavy to replace him. But again, you can see, Rose played 10 games, but really didn't play at all. But he had a team relying on like Boozer, Joakim Noah, and Luol Deng, and an emerging Jimmy Butler to lead the team. By this point, Jimmy Butler was starting shooting guard and averaging 13 points per game, which was pretty solid. Luol Deng was really the leader of this team offensively. He was an All-Star this year, and Joakim Noah was Defensive Player of the Year and All-NBA First Team, so he had really stepped it up. And you'll see, their offensive rating was near last in the league, but their defensive rating was second, and still with Luol Deng, Jimmy Butler, Joakim Noah, this was Taj Gibson. This was still a really solid defensive team. They ultimately did lose in the first round to Washington, and the result was really, again, just because they didn't have a go-to option. And I believe they had traded Luol Deng at the deadline because he was going to be an upcoming free agent. You'll see he only played 23 regular season games, so in the playoffs they really struggled because even their best player was gone by that point offensively. So Their leading scorer was Taj Gibson, but they didn't really have a chance in this series against Washington whatsoever. This next year was kind of a revamp, as I had mentioned. Luol Deng was gone. Carlos Boozer was gone from free agency too. So what they had done was they brought in basically a combination of Nikola Mirotic and Pau Gasol to replace those guys with the free agent money that they had, and they were a pretty solid team. They were the third seed in the East. Derrick Rose is finally healthy enough to play a good amount of the season again. Jimmy Butler really emerged as like a fringe All-Star candidate this year, averaging 20 points and 6 rebounds a game. So yeah, your main offensive go-to guys were Gasol, who played at All-Star level, Butler, and Derrick Rose, and then good supporting pieces of Joakim Noah, Dunleavy, Taj Gibson, and Mirotic and Aaron Brooks. In the playoffs, they actually played really well and nearly beat Cleveland. You know, the two to four series loss is not as close as it actually was. Like they were like about a shot away in Game 4 from going up 3-1, but then LeBron made a game-winning shot and it tied it at 2-2. But you know, if I look at why they didn't really do super well in the playoffs, there's no particular reason. It really just this year was just that. Um, Honestly, Cleveland just bested them, and that's really why they lost. No, but no gaping hole, and I think people were kind of ready to see what this team could do going forward, and they were kind of retooled with Gasol in there. Rose was finally healthy again, and Butler was emerged as like an all-star candidate. So this was really what people thought was the beginning of a new era for the Bulls. And then this next year, the Bulls actually didn't make the playoffs for the first time this whole video. And if I have to look to why, it's probably that Joakim Noah, who was really their anchor defensively, he missed a lot of time, only played 29 games, and even then was basically playing very limited minutes and really wasn't himself all year. Um, you still had Jimmy Butler, Gasol, and Derrick Rose, but they had to rely a lot more on Gibson and Mirotic, who are good players, but are not really guys who you want to have to be heavily relying on, like as starters playing heavy minutes. So that hurt them a bit. Um, Also, offensively, outside of Rose, Gasol, and Butler, really nobody else on the team played very well at all this year. So they struggled because of that, and their defense was just middle of the road because Joakim Noah was basically a non-factor this year. So there you go, guys. That's the rise and fall of the Derrick Rose Bulls. Derrick Rose was traded this offseason following this 2016 season. So the Bulls really just were done with this era by this point. They had one more season of Butler there before he got traded, and that's it. Yeah. So if I had to sum up why they succeeded, it was because they had a ton of defensive-minded players who were willing to try super hard, and Derrick Rose basically exploded into like an MVP level player. And then why did they plateau and ultimately fall down? To me, it's just because of the Derrick Rose injury. If he would never have gotten injured in 2012 in the playoffs, who knows what would have happened that year. And then he essentially missed the next two seasons right in the heart of this team's window for championship contention. So that really destroyed any chance they had of succeeding super well. So there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Check out more in the series of the playlist of the Rise and Fall series if you're interested. And I will see you next time. Bye.